Yes, I think, is this on? Right, let us make a start, and it's really good to be here, colleagues. Vladimir, it's fantastic that you are here, and as Meta said, this has been nearly 4 long years for brave Ukrainians fighting, and I, for one, have been particularly struck with the severity of the attacks on civilians, particularly in recent weeks and months, on a daily basis. So it's very good you're here. Maya, it is fantastic that you are here. A great victory for you and Moldova, but also a massive victory for Europe as well in the face of interference from Russia. So it is really, really good to have you on the panel here this morning. And I think, Meta and others, we've seen in recent weeks the appetite that Putin has to not only rain down on Ukraine, but also to take action and to interfere right across Europe in many different ways, whether that's in relation to our airspace, whether it's cyber or other attacks that have been going on. They are unrelenting and they show an appetite to continue this, and we must fight it with everything that we have. And it's a reminder for all of us, Vladimir, that this is not just a question of Ukrainian sovereignty, it's a question of the values and freedoms of all of us, particularly in Europe, and that we are all in this fight in relation to the Russian aggression. We've done a lot of work on the coalition of the willing. I'm not going to go through that here, other than to say that we must always remind ourselves that the coalition of the willing, the security guarantees, what we've done to try and ensure that if there is a ceasefire, it is just and lasting, mustn't sort of seduce us into thinking that the work is over in terms of supporting Ukraine now. And so the first point really is to be really clear that we must continue that support for Ukraine, notwithstanding the work of the coalition of the willing. And that means putting Ukraine in the strongest possible position. And that then means more on air defences, more on long range and anti-drone attacks. And of course, the work that we're doing on the reparations loan in relation to the Russian assets, which has been really important work led very ably and very smartly in terms of the progress that we're making there. And of course, as we continue to strengthen the position of Ukraine, we must do that in conjunction with and alongside the work we're doing with President Trump and others in this. The second thing is that we must always look to strengthen NATO. We had an excellent summit earlier this year, Mark, very, very successful, where I think NATO emerged at the end of that summit stronger than we went in, more united, with real resolve and focus. And we need to keep that because, you know, whether it's air defences in Poland, where we, the UK, sent planes across, whether, Meta, it's the work that we've had to do in the last week or so here with NATO allies working with you to counter the drones. That means that we're here on a beautiful day having our meeting, which wasn't necessarily guaranteed this time last week. I think that shows that we have to make sure that through the framework of NATO we support each other against this aggression and interference. And then finally, we must keep up this pressure on Putin. The economic pressure is having an effect, and we need to continue that pressure through further sanctions, bearing down on energy in particular, and on the shadow fleet. So on all those fronts, supporting Ukraine in the fight, absolutely clear in our support of NATO allies and others, and then bearing down on Putin. So I wanted just to open with that. Emmanuel, can I come to you next, and then we'll come around the panel.
Thank you, Keir. Thank you very much, Meta, for once again organizing this summit. And let me just tell you, before we jump to the situation in Ukraine, as you mentioned and framed it, Keir, that it's clear that this format as well is the right place to deal with so many conflicts or hard situations, and we are focused on the Ukrainian situation, given the aggression war launched by Russia. But Antonio was right as well to highlight the peace treaty signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think this is a great achievement, and I want to congratulate the two leaders. And we are very as well focused on what's happening in Caucasus and Western Balkans. And this is the solidarity of this continent. And once again, given this, I would say, holistic approach we have to do for this common place we have, Europe, the elections in Moldova were a great achievement. And Maya, once again, congratulations, because this is a test case for our resilience. We will revert on these topics later today. But the capacity to resist to the interferences and the misinformation coming from Russia was clearly at the core of your campaign, and you resisted. And I think it's very interesting for all of us as well to have your clear feedback and the lessons learned from this victory, because this is something which is useful to be implemented by the rest of the club, because now we have interferences in all elections. And I can tell you, because I had interferences in my two elections, 2017 and 2022, and quite efficient, I have to say, but not successful, but less aggressive than the one in Moldova. As for Ukraine, Volodymyr made it very clear in his statement, and I think the conclusion of your initial speech, Mete, was very important. We are at a moment where Russia is not clearly getting its main objectives. It's not the 3-week special operations. They didn't get Kyiv. They didn't change the regime. I would add to that, two great friends joined NATO, which is a big strategic defeat for Russia on top of it. Now the question is how, not just to sustain the war efforts, but clearly change the dynamic and help Ukraine in this context. I have to say, altogether, we worked very hard during the past few months, and I think the situation is much better today than it was at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, our fear was to have a sort of very rapid peace, and we had some doubts about the level of support of the United States. Now, first we built the coalition of the willings. A large part of you are member of it, and I think this is a great achievement of the past few months, and you mentioned it here. But we had the clear planification of commitments the day after a truce or a peace treaty or a ceasefire to have a robust and long-standing peace. And it's very important in terms of sustainable support to the Ukrainian army and the level of commitment we are ready to provide. Second, we managed collectively to re-engage with the United States. And the statements of the President of the United States last week are a huge change if you compare them with your presence in the Oval Office a few months ago. So, I mean, it's very important because for me it's a concrete case of countering the misinformation spread by Russia. No, Russia is not winning. No, Ukraine is not losing this war, and the situation is very different. And I think there is the same approach now regarding the conflict. And it's part as well of the frustration of the US president vis-à-vis the absence of commitment of Russia. And President Trump took several initiatives to re-engage with President Putin and to go to the table of negotiation. And it's now clear that all these words where President Putin was saying, I'm ready to negotiate peace, were not totally a sincere commitment. So now the key points for all of us are, number one, to follow and to step up and to scale up in terms of support vis-à-vis Ukraine. Air defense systems, drones, and I I mean, the level of innovation and efficiency of the drone system is very impressive, and Volodymyr was very clear on the level of support and financing they need in order to be efficient on the ground. And this is one of the best ways to change precisely the situation and gain some territories, recover some territories. And third, long-range missiles. So let's focus on these three categories, as you mentioned as well here, in terms of financing, capacities to deliver, and we are working hard to accelerate as well the key deliveries in that, but accelerate as well the common projects and the common financing on these three issues. In parallel, in order to put pressure on Russia, in order to create more incentives to come back at the table of negotiations, we have our sanctions, and the 19th sanctions package proposed by the Commission was a very important one. We coordinate, we step up, and we are more and more efficient. And I want to insist on the shadow fleet, as you mentioned. Because following our key figures, today 30 to 40% of the war effort is financed through the revenues of the shadow fleet. It represents more than 30 billion euro. So it's extremely important to increase the pressure on this shadow fleet because it will clearly reduce the capacity to finance this war effort for Russia. So we put a series of sanctions on them. I mean, on the boats and on the insurance companies, harbors, and so on. But now we have clearly a way to increase the pressure by coordinating a holistic approach on this shadow fleet. And what we did in the past few days with our Navy, just in order to make controls and to make sure that it was a vessel we identified, a series of vessels, and to be sure they were compliant with international rules, delivered very concrete results. First, because you can identify the presence of a shadow fleet on your coast. Second, because you can make sure that they are compliant with or not with international rules. But third, and it's very important, because you kill the business model by detaining, even for days or weeks, these vessels and forcing them to organize themselves differently and killing the efficiency of the business model. Because this model has been organized even before 22, but is now totally industrialized. And I suggest that in the framework of the coalition of the willing, with close coordination with NATO, we work to see how to optimize this common action. But just to tell you, the vessels we clearly identified, on which we made the checkings, and now we have a legal action, was declared in under a fake pavilion, but was exactly the same which was controlled by Estonia under a fake pavilion, but was exactly the same which was controlled by Estonia last March, for the same reasons. And as we stop them during 1-2 weeks' time, we completely break the efficiency of the organization. So Shadow Fleet is a very good target if we want to improve our efficiency to reduce these capacities. And I think this is a very important step forward in order to increase our pressure on Russia. Obviously, the objective of that is to allow in parallel Ukraine to recover territories, but as well to increase this pressure on Russia to come back at the table of negotiation. My last point, regarding all the provocations we have in Poland, in Estonia, and I want to reiterate our sincere solidarity, I think we had the fair reaction by Article 4 on NATO, more coordination, and as well additional capacities. We sent some additional Rafales and so on. And it's very important as well to go till the end of the inquiries on what happened in Denmark and for some others, because it's very important to make full clarity. I think the main answer should be more unpredictability and more strategic ambiguity. And I think it's very important to have a clear message. Drones which would violate our territories are just taking a big risk. They can be destroyed, full stop. And we are not here to provide the full notice. we will do what we have to do to preserve our air integrity and our territorial integrity. And for the aircraft, we have a process under the coordination of NATO. And I think this process will create as well more unpredictability. Deterrence should be key to preserve our consistency. But the message which is very important to convey from this meeting is that we are ready and we are in the position to preserve our air and our territorial integrity. We are ready on the eastern flank of NATO, and we are ready at the same time and on top of that, and without reducing this commitment, to provide security guarantees for Ukraine. This is the same approach, and all these approaches are clearly compliant, and it was fairly assessed by the Secretary General of NATO. Thank you, Keir.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And I think this focus on the shadow fleet is so important. We need to intensify that, particularly in light of what's happened in the last few days. So really important. Donald, can I come to you? Because obviously we saw the incursion of drones and the reaction to that. So over to you, really, because if we cannot ignore the fact that over recent weeks and months, there has been, at the very least, an increased appetite for recklessness on behalf of Putin. So, Donald.
Thank you. I will be very brief because I think from my point of view everything is more or less clear when it comes to the whole war context. First of all, again, congratulations. We were very happy together with Emmanuel and Friedrich to be there just before your election, and we felt how difficult the situation was and still is. But your example, this is a good lesson for all of us, because it means that if you are determined enough, if you are courageous enough, you can win. Also, if you are, small Moldova, you can win against Russia, because it was in fact, the elections in Moldova, not only in Moldova, as you said, but in Moldova it was a very spectacular example. The elections, it is also a part of a very untypical war we live in fact. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I said that the post-war epoch had ended and that we entered the pre-war epoch. Unfortunately, it is no longer the case, because in fact we are in time of war today. And for me, your lesson, but also what we experience in Poland with all these provocations from the Russians and Belarusians. For me, it means that today it's absolutely obvious that we have to stop all this kind of illusions. The first illusion was and is that there's no war. It's some of us, we like this definition like full-scale aggression or incidents or provocation. No, it's war. A new type of war, very complex, but it's war. Shadow fleet. Now we have signals. The last one was, I received a message from Warsaw. We have another incident now close to Szczecin port. 2 days ago it was an incident close to our Petro-Baltic platform and our pipeline. Both are Russian vessels. And in fact, we have a new incidents in our region, I mean Baltic Sea, every single week. It's almost every day. We have the drones attack or provocation was the most spectacular one when it comes to the Polish side. But in fact, we have similar provocation also every single day on our border with Belarus. You know the situation, but it's nothing. War is not an abstraction now for us, because we have on our border with Belarus, we have more than 100 attempts per day, and it's some kinetic actions against our soldiers on our border, with victims also. It's our daily routine now. This permanent confrontation with Belarusian services and this weaponized illegal migration, really well organized by Putin and Lukashenko. It is a kind of war also. Estonia, dozens of violations. This was not the first attempt, the violations of Estonian airspace. This is why it is a war. We are also a target for the Russian aggression, not only with the hybrid tools, but also when it comes to political goals, intentions. And it's clear, not only in Moscow, I think that the whole West is under threat. And the aggression against Ukraine is just the first phase of this new approach. Second, we can hear in I think all capitals in Europe this narrative. This is okay. If it is war, it is not our war. It is our war. Okay, Ukraine is in the front line now, but in fact we have this aggressive actions, provocations, etc. And all of us are targets, the possible targets for these attacks. All of us are targets, the possible targets for these attacks. Keir, you know this also personally, how strange and how dangerous they can be, also physically, kinetically against us. It is our war, and if Ukraine loses, it means our failure. I have no doubts in a mid-term or long-term perspective. And the third illusion is also very well prepared by Putin's propaganda, is that we are not able to win this war. That it is impossible for Ukraine and for all of us to win this war. It's an absurd. The only advantage, the Russian advantage, the only one, is mentality. We are much bigger than them. You know, the GDP of Poland will be comparable to the Russian one of Poland in 2 years. Economically, they have no chance against us. Our population is almost 500 million. Together with UK, have 500 million against 150. We are much richer, technologically, much better prepared. The only Russian advantage is here and here. I mean, they are ready to fight. They are ready to sacrifice something. They are ready to suffer. And the psychological advantage, this is why we are so, sometimes we are so, not decisive enough and not determined enough. And this is why the Moldovan example is so important. It's not only a symbolic one, but also something very practical. If you are determined enough, you can win. And our yesterday discussion about drone wall, about our reactions, should we destroy the Russian objects over Ukraine or in our airspace, I think it's absolutely clear that the most important and the last step in our efforts how to help Ukraine to win this war is more determination. Money is not the problem. I mean, it's always the problem, but compared to, sorry? Not the biggest. No. And this is my appeal. And as I said yesterday, I am not interested in escalation. I am the last one here who is interested in escalation, because we will be the first victim of the war. And for Poland, peace and ceasefire, this is something absolutely the highest priority for us. But we know, not only because of our history, because of geography, but also we know something about the Russian intentions and plans. We know that if they win against Ukraine, it is also in the future the end of my country and of Europe. I have no doubts. And this is why we have to be as determined as Volodymyr and his people, and as Maya and her nation. Thank you.
Maya, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support and for the kind words. The elections we had on September 28th were not simple elections. This was a test for a democracy under attack. Russia spent hundreds of millions of euros in these elections to illegally finance political parties. Well, they've been supporting some political parties for decades, but only in the last 2 years they've created at least 7 new political parties in Moldova. We have it's very easy, as it should be in Moldova, to create a political party. Of course, all these attempts to destabilize the country, all these attempts to hire people on the ground to produce disinformation in addition to what we have been receiving from Moscow. And the lessons that we have learned is that exposure and prevention work. These are the 2 lessons that we have learned, and this is what has helped us. Because